Bun venit la Worksounds, un podcast despre muncă și HR, despre transformare și viitor, despre agilitate și progres. Worksounds este realizat de BusinessMark, o companie de organizare evenimente business ce crede în puterea schimbului de idei și a conversațiilor autentice între profesioniști.
Hello, I'm Leonard Rizoiu. I'm a founder and managing partner at leoHR, and I'm happy to be the host of Worksound on a special occasion. You are listening to a special episode recorded at HR Uncovered, an event organized in Bucharest by BusinessMark, the producer of this podcast. We are here at Moxie Bucharest Old Town, and I'm here with Pete Coulson, who is one of the speakers today, special guest international speakers. Thank you, welcome, and thank you for accepting our invitation to the conference.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Pete is a dynamic leader in talent acquisition management and strategic HR with a proven track record of driving innovation and excellence across global tech giants. Pete was part of companies such as Spotify, Tesla, and Zalando. Of course, I will not ask you which one was the most challenging, but you can tell me which experience was the most challenging.
Oh, wow. So each of them, of course, presented their own challenges, but I think one of the largest challenges that I had come up against was setting aspirational diversity goals for one of the largest business units in one of the organizations I was working with. Reason being is that this is such an important topic, and it was an open question for the business for a number of years. And in each of our leadership meetings amongst HR and talent acquisition, the subject came up each time. Mm-hmm. Each time it came up, each time we discussed it, but there was no actions taken. Mm-hmm. And I continued to ask, why are we not taking action? Why is this not just being tackled? Understandably, it's a complex and challenging process and thing to put into place is to set aspirational diversity goals. So I just said, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it, and I'm going to work with those that need to be worked with in order to get this done, because it's such an important thing. So that was one of the biggest challenges, and there's a number of layers as to why it was challenging. And if you wish for me to go in deeper, I'm happy to do so.
You had an amazing presentation about middle management, and the middle management, the front line, and that line between upper management and, of course, the team members. There were very insightful information there. I wanted to ask you also at the conference, but I have the opportunity now. Do you think the Gen Z, the next generation, will behave the same like the others middle managers, or what are the difference between Gen Z middle management and millennials and other generations?
Wow, you really open up a big can of worms there. Reason being is that I would say, absolutely not. I don't believe that Gen Z is going to essentially follow suit as to what we've seen in Gen X and millennials. I think that there's a different frontier happening in the workforce. And do I see that for the positive? To an extent, yes. Where I've seen the new generation focus more of their attention in the workplace is ultimately on their mental health and well-being. And this is something that has not been widely discussed in the last 50 plus years of the working cultures that we've experienced. And now we're seeing it more than ever. And I think that the younger generation that's actually speaking louder about this is making a very big positive influence on millennials and upper generations. And that's going to be a major shift for us. And I think it's going to be for the positive, because the happier we are and the more mentally stable and psychological safety in the workplace, the more productive people seem to be. On the contrary, we do see that there are a lot of skeptics in that regard that are pushing back on this generational change towards this type of attention. But I think ultimately those individuals will likely fall behind. And those that seek opportunities of happiness and health are ultimately going to succeed. But this means a fundamental shift in the way that we work across almost all industries.
And what are the challenges to make this shift?
Anytime you have a significant cultural shift and a shift in the mindset, it needs to be more organic and gradual, opposed to it being forced, right? And I think what we've seen in especially post-pandemic, is that we're seeing a force of change happening, and that's forcing to go back to work, forcing to go back into more traditional, antiquated models of working, and that I think is like having a lot of resistance. If we see that there's gradual, natural, organic change and progression without it necessarily being like kind of shoved down our throat, it will make a positive impact, and it will make the change and that I think that we need as a society and as a being, as a species of people.
Are there some industries that it's not suitable, the work remote or the hybrid work, in your opinion?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at certain like manufacturing types of jobs, agriculture, etc., you're going to see that those types of models right now may not necessarily be accessible for remote work. But as we've seen a very steep curve in the integration of technology and artificial intelligence, those individuals that are actually working in the fields now, working in the factories today, are ultimately going to be the ones that are talking to the AI in order for them to be able to produce and manufacture what's happening, and or have the level of attention to detail necessary to be able to produce the livestock or grains and things like that in the agriculture sector. And that's going to be important. So we may not necessarily think that a farmer might be a remote worker one day, but if we see the integration of these technologies and their adaptation to these technologies, you will see that that could potentially shift in that direction, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if we have these types of automations and artificial intelligence integrating into these sectors. So are there other ones that we may see that may not have remote work? It's hard to say, because without having a crystal ball and that steepness of the curve of technical integration right now, it's difficult to say, but I can't really identify one that may not be in the future because of that.
Yes, and because you have an international experience, you experience North America, also Europe. Are there, or did you notice differences between the styles of implementation, the strategies taken?
Oh, I mean, yes, absolutely. And ultimately it comes down more to the specific cultural nuances. And, you know, there are some geographies and nationalities and regions that you might actually get more resistance, and some where you get more acceptance. I had to learn very quickly coming to Europe the different cultural nuances, as I moved from Canada and I was predominantly working with Canadians and Americans. That was my landscape. Immediately when I came to Europe, I started off in London, and I had a team in India that I was working with, a team in China that I was working with. I had several teams throughout Europe that I was responsible for, while then simultaneously cross-collaborating with Canada and the US. So you really had to identify all of these specific cultural nuances, and when you're trying to implement strategy, especially in the role that I had at that time, where I was managing the sourcing function within talent acquisition, it was really about how do you approach each of the different regions in such a way to ensure that your new process or new strategy implementation was done in accordance with their cultural nuance. Right? So each culture may see hierarchy in a different way or direction in a different way. So you really have to pivot at each communication that you have with them, and that's challenging but also extremely rewarding, because it internationalizes your experience and it opens up your eyes to understand how can we do things better in different regions, and ultimately identify and close gaps in different areas because of that. Right? You may have experienced resistance in one region on a strategy implementation, and upper management is saying it's not working there, but what was your approach? Was it the same all the way around?
Yeah.
If it was the same all the way around, you may have identified why.
One size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. And my question about the percentage, because a middle manager also delivers. Yes, it's a coach, it's a mentor, he managed the team, but also he deliver. In your opinion, what is the perfect percentage, coach and mentor and delivering?
It's not, even as I said, like a one-size-kind-of-fits-all answer, because I personally believe that a manager, like he or she, should not be in a position of delivery. I think ultimately their role is to upskill their team, to coach, to mentor, to train, to strategize, and then help with like process implementation, innovation, etc. So I don't think that there should necessarily be a percentage of like delivery and or hands-on work to such a degree. Throughout my career, almost 20 years in it, having sat in senior management and director level roles, there's always this element of having to be hands-on. And I'm seeing this more and more across organizations. It's just like you have to be hands-on. Strategy is more blue sky thinking, cloud thinking. It doesn't necessarily contribute towards the business. I need every person to be essentially delivering towards our bottom line, and it's about profitability and growth, and those are the things that I think at the end of the day is going to strain a middle manager and ultimately pull away from their true benefit of being in the position that they're in. So my percentage, I think at the beginning, depending if the person has just come into the organization, maybe like a 10-15% on delivery at the start, so they can truly understand the nuts and bolts and be in the weeds enough to be able to guide their team members from a hands-on perspective to an extent. But then from there on, they should really be focusing on the team strategy and innovation and growth.
We both agree that there are lots of middle managers who are delivering and they are very hands-on just because the organization it's asking it, and the upper management it's asking it, exactly as I said, being hands-on, meaning that you know exactly where to put pressure and how to manage the other one because you know exactly what they are doing. So as because we are approaching the end of our discussion, what would you advise the upper management from organization from Romania? Because here we have a lot of multinational companies. Some of the strategies we bring them from abroad and they are not taken in Romania. But what will be your advice in terms of middle management strategies?
Yeah, I think it goes back a little bit on what I had talked about before, is where we look at implementing change on a more gradual and organic basis. If you have that type of approach, often you will have created and implemented change to process, strategy, etc. within your organization without people even knowing. If you're able to have gradual change and it feel organic, your employee base won't even know necessarily that what they were doing 6 months ago is different from what they were doing today. And when you bring that up in a retrospective and identify, here are the key things that we have changed, often you can find, and through my own experience, that people are very surprised because there was reluctance at the beginning for said change. And once you've implemented it and you've gradually done it, and that's through very small steps, right? And once you see that in the expression and the return from your team members, you can really truly see that they start to then embrace change. So it's a cultural shift and it's a mindset shift. And I've seen it done in companies and in specific geographies where there's a lot of resistance to change, and we've always done it that way. And I've heard this many times. But when you have that gradual shift and that gradual organic change, and then people realize, they then get excited about change. And that's a lot of fun. How do you do it? It depends on what you're trying to implement. But I like to say, and most stakeholders, especially when you're in HR, hate when they hear this, but sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And what I mean by slowing down is making very small, gradual changes, which then lead to big changes, which then ultimately drive significant amount of change in output, increase performance exponentially, and you can see a massive difference if you do it the right way. And don't, again, like try to force it or shove it down your employees' throats. It won't work.
Very insightful information. Pete, once again, welcome in Romania. Thank you for accepting our invitation to the conference to be one of the guest speakers and to make this podcast. And I hope you really enjoy Romania if you're visiting it and coming back at the future conference that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Mulțumim că ați ascultat Worksounds, un podcast BusinessMark.